Hey everybody, Casey here with Life Abstract Gaming, and this week I want to go over the sophomore season of one of Netflix's breakout original series, Stranger Things.
It's like it's reaching into Hawkins. If anyone knows how to destroy this thing, it's Will.
Is anyone there? Anyone?
Stranger Things is a genre mashup that's both set in and a tribute to the 80s. Even if you can't rightfully claim to be an 80s baby, that time period affected so much media going forward that movies, music, and games from that time period have been etched into our minds and into our culture. Season 1 introduced us to a horror sci-fi story about a group of kids that lose a friend to the unknown, and the mystery only deepens when a girl with psychic abilities shows up right after. The first season wraps up a bunch of those mysteries, but leaves pretty big doors open for Season 2. So now that it's been released for a while and most people have binge watched, I think it's time to talk about it. From this point forward, I'm going to be giving my thoughts and impressions on the events of Season 2. So if you haven't watched it all yet and care, you can consider this your spoiler warning. Season 1 ended with a number of open story threads to intentionally leave you wondering what will happen next. Will's coughing up of a slug creature, Eleven's disappearance, and Hopper's deal with the feds. I think that the show actually does a great job of giving you satisfying answers to all those questions. In the case of Will, I felt like it would definitely be some sort of cop-out if the amount of time he spent in the Upside Down had left no lingering effects on him. While it's not clear at first whether that effect is mental or physical, they very quickly solidify that Will is in some way connected to the Upside Down, but I'll talk a bit more about Will later on. We learn that Eleven somehow teleported herself into the Upside Down when killing the Demogorgon and simply exited back into Hawkins through some gate left open in the school. It's never really explained or questioned how she managed to do that, and there are a number of shaky mechanics at work when dealing with the Upside Down creatures, and I'll also get into that later on. Hopper's deal with the scientists turns out to be an uneasy alliance between him and the government as they try their best to cover up their mistakes, and he tries to keep Eleven hidden until things are safe, which I thought was interesting since both sides really didn't trust one another. The story retreads a lot of its beats from the first season. The one that's most familiar is Will being put in distress once again. As I said earlier, Will gains what the others in the party call true sight, which lets him see into the Upside Down, only it's not something he can use voluntarily. And when it does happen, it makes him vulnerable to the new big bad enemy, the Shadow Monster. It's sort of confusing as to whether Will is just seeing the Upside Down or is actually there, but the analogy he used where he described the feeling as being between two slides of a Viewmaster leads me to believe that the true sight actually puts him in both dimensions at once. This is how the Shadow Monster can enter Will's body from the Upside Down and exist inside Will in Hawkins. The rest of the returning cast remains just as likable as before. Dustin still stands out as a favorite, but the new characters this season are kind of hit and miss. While Lucas's younger sister Erica isn't technically new, she gets significantly more screen time this season and is always hilariously rude. Bob the Brain Newbie, though, is by far my favorite new character, and I know I can't be alone. Early on, he's actually pretty suspicious to me. He's such a perfect guy to Joyce and her kids that I felt like he turned out to be a plant from the government to take advantage of the Byers family in some way, but he was really just that earnest of a person. Even though the advice he gives Will to stand his ground turns out to be incredibly bad, he saves the lives of many of the main characters not once, but twice in situations that nobody else could have possibly helped with. His death became incredibly impactful to me and the characters in the show, so that makes it doubly sad to see him go. Murray is actually pretty disturbing when you think about him. He gives alcohol to minors and then goads them into having sex in his apartment. It sounds really bad the way I put it, but that's exactly what happens.
How was the pullout?
Sorry?
The two biggest main characters, Max and Billy, honestly seemed arbitrarily inserted into the show. Max filled the lack of a female friend in the group, while Billy took the place of Steve as the non-supernatural bad guy and bully. While Max was likable enough, she really didn't impact anything important other than making Mike strangely moody and creating a rather weak love triangle, which is especially odd since there was already a much more interesting one already carried over from Season 1 between Nancy, Jonathan, and Steve. Billy truly confused me though. Unlike Steve, he doesn't get any real arc, even after learning that he's angry about moving, is possibly racist, and is sort of abused by his dad. I have a theory that maybe he's struggling with homosexuality, and that's why he seems both hostile and infatuated with Steve. His dad even makes a nasty homophobic comment when yelling at him, but we just don't get any kind of answer, and he doesn't get redeemed by the season's end for any of the douchey stuff he does. Some of the things I really didn't like so much in season 2 were the entire situation with the baby Demogorgon Dart. Dustin is just way too smart to be that stupid in keeping it even after they figure out that it's from the Upside Down. You could argue that because Dustin made a bond with the creature that later on saved everyone while in the tunnels, it all worked out for the best. But that opens the door to an even bigger issue that goes back to the shaky rules of the Upside Down creatures I mentioned before. The characters figure out that the Shadow Monster is a hive mind, so anything one of the creatures or Will is aware of, the others also know. Dart behaving differently from the others flies in the face of that entire concept. It's crazy that they decide to use this old cliche of a friendly enemy when it breaks their own monster's logic, especially in a show that has been applauded for subverting story tropes. I also felt like the situation with Elle and Kali was underused. The first episode introduced us to the idea that there are more kids like Elle in the world, and later they even show us that they can have different psychic abilities from one another, but ultimately it's an elaborate cover to give Elle a single lackluster training montage that's supposed to suggest to the audience that she's powered up. It was also a convenient way to keep Elle out of the main story where things would have been a lot easier to deal with if she had been around. If anything, I hope that gathering more of the kids from the experiments and learning about them is a focus of the next season. Even with those gripes, I enjoyed every single episode and was bummed to reach the end of the season. I'm still interested in learning more about the world of Stranger Things and its characters. I'm hoping season 3 can break off a little from its formula while maintaining the momentum of the franchise. So, what did you think of Stranger Things season 2? Was there anything about my thoughts you agreed or disagreed with? Let us know. We're listening.